Hi everyone, this is teacher André Hedlund, and I'm here to invite you to come to Fortaleza next month on the 25th to attend the National Geographic Learning Conference. Okay, I'll be talking about the neuroscience of language acquisition and learning. And Mr. Trunk is here, and he really wants you to come. Okay, now I was going to do a webinar to talk about this subject, and I decided just to record a video. So I'm going to show you, bits of my presentation so you can maybe ask some questions before you attend the conference, and also get more interested in the neuroscience of language acquisition and learning. I'm pretty sure your students will benefit from that, okay? Okay, so the neuroscience behind learning and second language acquisition. Cognitive benefits of being bilingual. That's the topic I'll be discussing next month. Remember, the 25th in Fortaleza, the Gran Marquise Hotel, okay? I'm not sure if you know who I am, probably not, but you can follow me on social media. So you can also send an email if you have any questions, and please access my blog as well, because I have a lot of entries about neuroscience there. I think they're very objective. They're not so complicated. It's a very complex subject, but I try to make it easier for teachers to understand it better anyway. So please just access my blog, and I hope you can find something useful there. First, concepts, okay? So cognition, very important concept here, is the mental process of knowing, including aspects such as awareness, perception, reasoning, and judgment, and that which comes to be known as through perception, reasoning, or intuition, knowledge. So cognition is basically thinking, it's basically knowing, and a lot of authors have talked about this. So you have Carl Jung's cognitive functions. You also have neuroscience discussing this topic. So you have on the psychiatry side, people talking about this, and you have on the neuroscience front, people talking about this, right? I'm going to focus on the neuroscience aspect of cognition, right? One very important aspect of cognition is the executive function. So the executive function is which regulates, controls, and manages thoughts and actions. Bilingual brains are better at this function. So that means we somehow, I'm assuming you are bilingual as well, we somehow can plan better, we have better attention, we have better organizing skills, decision-making skills, just because we are bilingual. How great is that, right? Here you can see that the executive function is also responsible for setting goals, organizing, flexibility, planning, prioritizing, and reflection, okay? Now, what does memory have to do with all this, right? Do you need memory to learn? Is memory important for you to learn? So let's take a look at how memory works. First, memory is the process of maintaining information over time, or the means by which we draw on our past experiences in order to use this information in the present, okay? Now, there are three very important stages that we have to know so that we can understand memory better. The first one is encoding, or I like to call it recording. So first, imagine your brain or your memory is a video camera. The first thing you have to do is push the button, right? The red button, the record button. Otherwise, you're going to block that. If it's not recording, nothing comes in, right? Then you have to store that somewhere, or save that information, that video somewhere. And finally, you have to be able to find the path back to that file, right? So if you're using a video camera, normally you have a memory card, and then you are going to save it first in the memory card, then you can, I don't know, maybe transfer that to your computer. But the thing is, can you find it? Do you know where you saved it? I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have when it comes to memory. Where did we save something? And how to get there, how to recover that information, right? Now, We have two kinds of memory, basically. We have the short-term memory, and we have the long-term memory, right? Short-term memory is the memory that we use to store or to get new information, right? Recent information. And long-term memory is basically permanent. So you have old information there. And you can access both of them very easily, quite easily. But the thing is, the duration, how long that information will last, that's the point. If you're using the short-term memory, it lasts almost nothing. It's a really short period. And if you're accessing your long-term memory, the information really lasts for a very long time, years. Short-term memory, it's recycled every day. A couple of minutes after, it's gone, right? But the thing is, how do you transfer whatever you learned now to your long-term memory so you can remember forever or for a very long time? How do you do that? What's the key, right? So the key is repetition or revision, basically. Training, practice, right? We have a lot of words we can use here. But repetition is the secret. That's why we have to practice whatever skill we're learning. We have to do it many times until it's incorporated or consolidated. That's the technical word we should use here. When you transfer whatever you learned from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, memory consolidation is occurring there, okay? Now, sleeping is very important for this process because it is during sleep that memory consolidation happens. And it's actually in the very last hour of our sleep. That's when the REM, rapid eye movement, is happening, processing everything that we saw, we heard, we felt, you know, the day before. And unfortunately, we don't really have control of that process, which means that whatever your brain is choosing for you to remember is completely, well, it's a subconscious process anyway. You cannot control. So that means that the next day, most of what you were exposed to the previous day will be gone, completely gone. Some things will be transferred to your long-term memory, but it's not very, you cannot know what will be transferred to your long-term memory. That's why we have to practice and revise to make sure that we learn something, right? And the neuroscience of learning basically studies how the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system work together to create and retain new knowledge and skills, okay? So a very important part of our brains, especially when we're talking about learning and language acquisition, is the temporal lobe, which is basically this area here, temporal lobe, right? And this area is very important for memory, understanding, and language. So you will have the auditory cortex very close to this area here. Hearing is also controlled by this area. And of course, memory is not something you can find in a very specific part of the brain. It's all over the brain, different areas anyway. But we know that the temporal lobe plays a very important role in learning anyway. And also we have to be aware of something I believe everybody knows, or maybe you've heard about this, something called synapses, right? So a synapse, or it's basically a space between neurons, right? So they don't touch. So they're like, there's a distance between them like this. And through this gap, this space, you have electrical charges and brain chemicals or neurotransmitters going through all the way and making connections, basically, right? So synapses are very important for learning because it's through the synapses that information passes, right? Also, very, very important for learning is are actually the amygdala and the hippocampus, okay? So the hippocampus is responsible for attention, focus. That's why you can only learn if you're focused. You can only learn if you're paying attention. And the amygdala is the fear center, or the emotional response center. So it controls how we respond emotionally to something, right? If there's no emotion involved in learning, it's not going to be very effective. So if you are afraid, if you're hungry, if your basic emotions are not met somehow, you are probably not paying attention. You have a very bad feeling towards whatever you're trying to learn. You're not comfortable, so learning doesn't happen effectively, right? The basic process of learning and really incorporating or consolidating memory goes like this. First, you have to learn something, you have to be exposed to something, then you have to be able to remember, and finally do it or apply whatever you learned, right? That's the way it should go anyway. And to illustrate that, we have Birch's learning curve, right? Or competency curve that goes like this. There is a moment before you learn anything that you have no idea you have to learn it, or maybe you don't have to learn it, but you don't know that you don't know something, right? We call this stage the unconscious incompetent stage. I don't know that I don't know. And then you find out that you don't know something. So I know that I don't know. That's the conscious incompetent stage. And you can make a very important decision now. You can decide to know, to learn the skill, right? So you learn, you start learning. So now I know, but I need to practice. That's the conscious competent stage. So it's not so easy for you to do this, whatever it is you're learning. Let's talk about English. I know, but I still need to practice. It doesn't come so naturally to me, so I still have to make a lot of efforts, let's say. And finally, and that's the stage we would like to get to, the unconscious competent stage is the one in which you say, I don't even think about it. It's natural, it's familiar, like driving a car, you know. Do you remember when you first started learning how to drive? It was probably it required a lot of effort at the beginning. Nowadays, you can drive and do a million things at the same time. I don't advise you to do that, but we can do it, right? If you're an experienced driver, you know the feeling. You don't even think about it, just do it, right? And Bloom has talked about that too. This is Bloom's taxonomy, right? So you have the first stages, or the low order skills. So you have remembering. First you have to remember, then you have to understand something, and then apply. And then at the very top, the high order skills there, thinking skills, you can create, evaluate, and analyze, which means if you are at this level, the creating, evaluating, analyzing level, you would be an unconscious competent learner or practitioner of whatever you have learned, right? And what I will discuss, a couple of things I will discuss are some neuromyths and neurofacts, right? According to the American Psychological Association and a lot of other studies that I have read, and a lot of videos I've watched as well. And this is very interesting because we know a lot about how the brain learns, but we're not really implementing practices in our classrooms, which means we are missing out on a very interesting opportunity to make learning more effective. So the first thing is learning styles. They don't really exist, actually. I'm going to discuss this. You can check out my blog as well, because there's no such thing as a person, an auditory person that only learns via or through, audio input or listening to something. It really depends on the subject you're teaching. And I always give this example. How can you teach physical geography or cartography in a non-visual way, for example? Because we have visual learners, right? What about the people who are not visual learners? So that means they cannot learn cartography. Ask yourself this question. It doesn't go like that, right? The only way for you to teach maps, I guess, is in a visual way. And everybody learns, everybody can learn. And if there is an auditory student in the classroom and you want to cater to the student's need, right? You have to use an auditory way of input. How can you do it for cartography? So just think about that for a moment. Too much homework is bad for the students because there's a limit. There's a limit of how much information we can take in. And if we're giving too much homework, if we're assigning too much homework, that means that we're stressing our students' brains, and they already have a lot of homework to do from, you know, everything else they're studying at school. And there's a limit. There are a lot of studies indicating that they shouldn't study over 1 hour, 1 hour and a half a day. And if you think about it, just if you're teaching English like I am, maybe they should be studying 10 or 15 minutes of English a day. I know it sounds a little unorthodox, right? But it would work better anyway. It would be more effective. Also, spaced repetition must be prioritized. This is very, very important. And a lot of the studies I read show very clearly that the best way for your brain to learn is to give space and forget, right? So you learn something today and you're going to bed, right? You sleep. Next morning, you should revise in the morning to actively retrieve what you have learned or not learned yet. Still, you know, it's a process, right? And then after a couple of days, you should do the same thing. So you should revise after a couple of days, and then after a couple of days, and so on, right? Which means that learning happens over a period of time. It doesn't really happen right after the class is done. And we are, teachers are under the impression that, oh, we talked about that, so you learned it. Not really, no. Just because we talked about something in the classroom, it doesn't mean they learned it. And to be very honest, the only way for us to assess if they have learned it or not is if we give it some time, okay? So we have to go, that's why we have, we should have revisions and tests and quizzes and everything after a while to really check if they have learned something, okay? Also, brain breaks increase learning effectiveness. As I told you, we have to consider that our short-term memory has a very short span, right? So we have to be able to, after a while, I'd say after every block of 15 minutes teaching and talking and doing something, take a break, maybe a 2-3 minute break. Let the student's brain relax a little. And the break can be something related to the content you were teaching, or it can be something completely, you know, not related. So maybe you can play a song. So you teach for 15 minutes and then you play a song, just to play a song. Or you allow your students to check their messages on their cell phones, or, you know, I will discuss that as well. There are many things you can do, right? Or you can play with Mr. Trunk. So let's throw Mr. Trunk around, right? Also, quizzes are a great tool for active retrieval because there are some techniques we use for studying that are not very effective, like rereading things and summarizing and highlighting. There's a very, very good, very comprehensive study with different students all over the United States. And they tested, I think, over 12 categories of techniques for us to study. And most of them, the ones we actually thought are very good, very effective, they don't work as well as we thought anyway. So quizzes are a very good way because you have to actively, as I said, actively retrieve what you have learned. So when you look at a flashcard, for example, and you have to remember what it means, or there's a gap filling exercise, and you have to remember how to fill in the gap. You're actively retrieving whatever you are studying, and that's good. But if you take a book and you go through your notes and you go through your, the highlighted parts of the text or whatever, and you go like reading that and you go like, oh yes, I know this. We have this false impression that something is familiar, and we feel like, I know this. Yeah, I don't have to study that. Not really. It's just your memory. You remember that you've studied that, but do you really know how to access that information? So you should not study by rereading or summarizing. They are not the best ways. Quizzes are very good anyway. And also I will talk about the neuroscience of language acquisition, and I will talk about two very important areas that are responsible for learning or acquiring a new language: the Broca's area and the auditory cortex, Wernicke's area, right? So Broca's area, very close to the motor cortex, is basically responsible for the physicality of having or acting in the language, let's say, speaking the language and hearing and everything, moving your lips, your vocal cords. And so the physical aspect of the language is controlled by Broca's area. Now, Wernicke's area is responsible for the abstract, let's say, or the imagery of a language, right? Connecting the symbols, the words, the sounds to the meaning of them. And that's why the auditory cortex is very close, and it plays a very fundamental role anyway in language acquisition, I should say. I don't want to say learning and acquisition in the same context because they are a little different. I will also discuss that anyway. And last year I traveled to Israel. I went to the University of Haifa to talk to this man, Dr. Avi Karni, and he's a neuroscience expert studying the language acquisition of kids and adults, right? And he published this article a couple of years ago: No Childhood Advantage in the Acquisition of Skill in Using an Artificial Language Rule. So the critical period hypothesis and kids are better learners, that's not necessarily true, and I will discuss why. Of course, if you observe kids and you feel like, okay, but they learn better, but it's not because their brains are necessarily better fit for learning a language, but it's more about the conditions of their class, of how the lesson goes, of their lives and everything. They have a lot of neuroplasticity, yes, it's higher than in adult brains, but still it's not very significantly different in a way that it gives them an edge, if you know what I'm saying, right? So I'm going to talk about how we could somehow transform our environments and the conditions in which we teach our adult learners to somehow match those conditions to those you can find in children's classrooms anyway, and maybe make our adult learners more proficient and faster, And I will also, of course, discuss, that's the whole point of this talk, right? The cognitive benefits of bilingualism. And the only thing I can tell you right now is that being bilingual is awesome. It's basically good for many, many things. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that it's great for your executive function, so you can make decisions faster, you can organize better, it's good for attention. It basically delays some brain diseases, degenerative diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So it's just, you know what, if you don't speak another language, you should learn right now. It's really good for your brain, and it doesn't really matter when you start learning again. So the benefits will be good for both kids who started learning at a very early age, or adults and older people. It doesn't really matter. Okay, that's it. I hope you guys got interested in the talk. I hope you can attend the conference that will be happening on the 25th, Gran Marquise Hotel, next month actually, here in Fortaleza. I'm here in the hotel in Fortaleza because I came to deliver a training session, and I decided to make this video to help you, and also maybe I don't know, share some of the knowledge I've been acquiring, and help you make your classes, your lessons better, you know, based on neuroscience, because it's science, right? We like science. I love science. And there are many studies, and I'm pretty sure that if you apply some of the concepts, you can make learning more effective, okay? So that's it. And Mr. Trunk is here. Can you see him? Yes. And Mr. Garfield. Yes. Bye-bye. Okay, that's it. And if you liked it, I hope to see you on the 25th in Fortaleza next month. And also, this is part of my English development course. So if you're interested, I have actually, this is a very, very small part of module 3, in which I talk about neuroscience. So if you're interested in maybe having an edition in your school somewhere, just let me know, okay? Follow my blog, you have all my contact information there, so you know how to get in touch, right? And I'll be giving a course about neuroscience in Goiânia next month, so more information to come soon, and hopefully in August in Belo Horizonte. That's it. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your, I don't know, what day is it today? I'm lost. Saturday? Okay, so that's it. Bye-bye. See you. Bye-bye.